institutionalize the use of quality matters rubric for higher education. So Kimberly's done a lot. We love working with her as one of our partners, and glad to have you on here today, Kim.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Derek Virgil from Winston-Salem State University. So Derek joined Winston-Salem State back in 2008 as director of the Language Arts Center. He has 7 years of experience as director of multicultural affairs at Ball State University. Right now, what he does, he supervises a lot of different units at Winston-Salem State, including the Writing Center, the Quantitative Skills Center, the Reading Center, the Academic Success Counseling Center, the Learning Resource Center, and the University Campus Research. Derek's background in education, he received his BS and Master's both from North Carolina A&T State University, and he received his PhD in educational leadership and policy analysis from the University of Missouri. Really glad to have you on board here today, Derek, as well.
Glad to be here.
And then finally, our third panelist today is Melvin Hines. Melvin started Upswing 5 years ago after receiving his JD MBA from Duke University. While he was there, Melvin founded a public policy forum on education, and he's focused his whole career on finding ways to increase student retention rates from high school all the way up to college. So great to have you, Melvin, as well.
It's great to be here. Good to be here.
Okay, that looks like there's a slight echo. Kim and Derek, if you guys could just mute your microphone when you aren't speaking, I think that might help with the echo a little bit.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Okay, looks like that helped. Did that help you, Mildred? Do you still hear the echo? Okay, perfect. Thanks for doing that, Derek. All right, so to kick things off, what I wanted to do was just give Kim and Derek and Melvin a chance to just give a background on their institution. So Kim, maybe you could go first if you wanted to tell us a little bit about NC Central, the students who go there, what kind of college it is, and kind of what your role entails within the university.
Sure. Thanks, Alex, and thanks for everyone. Central University, as Alex mentioned, is located in Durham, North Carolina. We are a historically Black institution, and we were founded in 1910. We currently have an enrollment at under 8,000 students. The way we have set up our e-learning here, my unit, which is the Division for Extended Studies, we primarily are the central arm or administrative arm for all of our e-learning activities here on campus. So we manage scheduling, faculty contracts, faculty training, resources and support services for students. And with that, we also work very closely with our department chairs and deans and faculty to actually develop online programs or discuss and look at trends and data to find out what programs we should look to move online. And once we do that, we take faculty through an intensive training through our Quality Matters rubric. And what that allows us to do is create some type of standardization for our online. Faculty still have lots of flexibility to make sure that, you know, they are presenting their content the way they would like and making sure they're reaching those student learning outcomes. However, we do want to standardize our e-learning so that we can make sure that we're hitting key things, assessments, accessibility standards, and those types of things. So that's what my office does, and part of that was to identify a solution to help our online population with tutoring services. We have a pretty robust tutoring our service here on campus through our university college, and we were trying to find a way to mirror that for our online population, and that is how we're utilizing Upswing.
That's wonderful, Kim. Thanks so much for that background. Derek, we'd love to hear a bit about Winston-Salem State now as well, and kind of your role within that institution.
Sure. So now I'm getting some echo too, but hopefully the technology will stay stable. So again, my name is Derek Virgil. I'm Associate Dean for University College and Lifelong Learning. My area of supervisory responsibility involves all the university's tutoring areas. I'm the chair for our first year writing program, assistant professor over in English. We're over the academic enhancement plan, which basically entails our athletic study hall program, which includes our choir and our band. Also oversee our student support services area. We nicknamed it BOSS, federally funded TRIO program. And I'm the point person for our grades first and the Upswing online interface. To give you some demographic information, of course, we're a historically Black institution founded in 1892. And approximately today, we have 70% of our student body is African American. 74% of our undergraduate students are African American. Our biggest challenge in reaching our students is helping them gain the culture that we're trying to create on campus, which is a culture of writing and a culture of engagement and a knowledge of the resources that are available. What Upswing allows us to do is to reach beyond the classroom, beyond the brick and mortar buildings in terms of providing academic supports. And it enables us to reach the students through whatever electronic device that they are using. And we've found that we've connected our goals in terms of our areas that we're trying to support here with our university strategic plan. And a part of that plan was to make academic services ubiquitous across campus. Upswing allows us to do exactly that. It allows us to reach the students where they are. If a student is a student athlete and on a bus going to a game or coming from a game, they can literally get onto Upswing and get the support that they need in a real asynchronous atmosphere. So the possibilities are endless with Upswing, and it's been a great support to our services here.
That's wonderful, Derek. Thanks so much for the background, and we're glad to be able to help you guys there. So I'd love to hand it over to Melvin and have him tell you all a bit more about how he got involved with education and what some of the initiatives are that he's been able to lead the team on at Upswing so far.
Hey guys, so I'm Melvin Hines, one of the co-founders of Upswing, and we, as Derek has already kind of mentioned, we work with colleges and universities to provide various student success services to help them to be able to achieve their goals. Really trying to focus on taking resources that are already on campus, already available, and trying to put it in a format that makes it easy for students to be able to access from a mobile perspective, also from a distance learning type perspective. We currently work with around 85 colleges. We actually started in North Carolina, which is where both North Carolina Central and Winston-Salem State are currently based. And we work with quite a few students that are minorities, and this was part of the reason why I personally became so interested in wanting to found Upswing. Uh, I originally grew up in South Georgia, a town called Albany, and uh, our town was majority African American, and it's actually home to an HBCU, Albany State University. And what I wanted to be able to do was provide the same type of support and resources um, to people who lived in towns like mine as you would receive in larger cities. And so fortunately we've been able to do that. We started off working with a lot of schools and universities in some of the more rural areas of North Carolina, and then we eventually were able to um, be able to gain the partnerships of North Carolina Central University and Winston-Salem State as well. And we've been able to learn a lot. Right now there's about 700,000 students that currently have access to Upswing, and over half of them are African American or Hispanic. And so we've been able to really learn a lot, and ideally provide a lot of information back to some of our partner colleges that can help them with some of their success initiatives as well.
That's great, Melvin. Thanks for that background. And I think that leads us in pretty nicely to our first question here for the panel, which is, what are the student success challenges faced by HBCUs? Kim, I would love to start off with kind of hearing your perspective on some of the challenges that your students face most often at NC Central.
Yes, sure. I think for us at NCCU, a large number of our students have to work. And so there is that, how do you balance work, school, home life, and make all of that work so that they can be successful in the classroom and matriculate in a timely manner through their programs. So it's often a challenge for us to make sure that we are providing the correct services, as well as providing them in the right format so that they are accessible at various times throughout the day and or week, so that each of our students can have an opportunity to access these services without having to be put to that hole of needing to be at, let's say, a tutoring center before 6 or 7 p.m., something like that. So that has been the most challenging piece for us, just making sure that we have the right services delivered in the right modality and at the right times so that our students can take advantage of them. We have for years provided a number of services, but as our population begins to grow and to change, that whole traditional student, what's a traditional student, what's the age now? So as we're seeing students coming in for the first time at about 22 or 24, we are learning that we have to adapt to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all our students, whether it's a traditional 18-year-old or that working adult who is coming back to the campus for school.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Kim, and that's something that we hear all the time for the schools that we work with. What would you say are some of the initiatives that you guys have rolled out that have been more successful in helping to create that kind of home life, work, school balance?
I would say one key piece is through our NCCU online platform. So as we have evolved more in the world of online learning, we have worked very closely with all of the service areas on campus to make sure that anything an on-campus student can do, our online students can do in terms of student services, from anything as simple as the cashier's office, paying a bill, having those consultations with a financial aid counselor. Those are done through WebEx now. So virtual sessions can be set up so that students don't have to come to campus and get in line to meet with someone. Definitely academic advising that is done through a WebEx platform as well. So the university invested in WebEx, so all our students on campus or online have access to that. But as we continue to talk to all of our different units about what's needed for our online population, though those same services and access are spilling over to our on-campus as well. So that investment in WebEx, serves two purposes for all of our students. And I think that's just been the key. And we still have some pieces to go, but it has really helped. The other thing that we've done in most of those areas, service areas, we have asked of those directors to give us a point person for our online students. And I think that's key as well, so that when we are speaking to our online population, we're able to say to them, contact and give them a name and a direct number in financial aid, in student accounting. So it's just kind of taking that extra step to make sure that we have people and services in place to assist our students.
That's wonderful, and I love that idea of giving students a point person so that it isn't like they're just trying to go out there and find a service. They're actually finding a person that they know will be able to help them, whether it's financial aid or advising or tutoring.
It makes a difference.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, Kim. Derek, we'd love to hear from your perspective, maybe what are some of the challenges. Maybe some of them are similar to Kim's, and maybe they're quite different.
Sure. I'm sure most of our challenges are very similar. I'm going to give you some statistics just to couch this piece of information I'm going to share within some statistics that reflect what the HBCU, in deference to the PWI, experiences. I just recently read an article from the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges. This is a 2014 study that while HBCUs make up only 3% of universities and colleges in the country, over 25% of all African American college graduates come from these institutions. And then the other piece of research that I pulled up, the Education Trust Survey in 2017 mentions that half of the nation's 103 or so HBCUs have a freshman class where 3/4 of the students are from low-income backgrounds, while just 1% of the 676 non-HBCUs serve as a high percentage of low-income students. So only 1% of that number of non-HBCUs serve that level of low-income students. So while HBCU students encounter the very same issues of homesickness, roommate conflicts, initial adjustment to the academic environment, values exploration, new social life adjustments that regular students at predominantly white institutions experience. We also have this piece that generally speaking, about 3/4 of our students are low income, first generation, and Pell Grant eligible, which means they may not have the support back home of back home of people that understand their situation. They may have individuals at home that are expecting support from them as students. So they have a lot of distractions that are unique to their situation. However, they're still using the same technology that all students are using. They're on their cell phones constantly. They'll often text more than they read. They're going to be in front of a laptop for a large majority of their time at institution. So the challenges are similar. to the student at the predominantly white institution, black or white or Hispanic or whatever nationality. However, we tend to get the student that is oftentimes not as prepared because of their K through 12 education. And they need some, whether we like to say it's remediation or not, developmental or however you want to term it, they need that sort of help. So what we have done is we have certain supports in place, and we recognize that the need is there. And we recognize also that, you know, PWIs have the same issue in different dynamics, but in terms of helping students get those foundational skill sets of reading, writing, and those math skills that they need to take them through the entire college time of matriculation. So we have a number of supports we're putting into place, we have in place. Similar to Central, we have professional advisors, we call them academic success counselors, that are introduced to our freshmen as soon as they come in for rendition. Rendition is our name for our orientation, and they get to know those advisors, and they're there to help with almost anything that the student can be concerned with, from financial aid to housing to college registration. But then we also recognize they need a way to get the academic support that will support them in terms of their academic success. So we have recently partnered with a Pearson company, My Foundations Lab, to provide reading, writing, and math supports within the classroom and outside of the classroom that can be utilized through our tutoring centers. And then Upswing, we literally implemented the writing lab portion of the Upswing product line as another support for our writing center and for our first year writing courses. And the ability to have the live tutor there in the corner while the student is actually having the tutoring session is amazing. It makes the student, once we get them to log in, that's our biggest challenge. We have to get some marketing out in different ways, and we're doing that. But once we get them to log in and they see how simple it is to log in and get a tutor, that helps them. And the data comes in, and we are able to measure impact, actual impact, through that process. So there are a number of ways we are trying to attack the challenges faced by those students.
Thanks for sharing that information. And I know one thing that, you know, Melvin and I were reading this the other day, that I think a similar article, and maybe the same one that you were talking about, mentioned how students at HBCUs graduate about, you know, are about 20% more likely to graduate than students at other institutions. What are some of the things that you do specifically at an HBCU that may not be done at, you know, a more traditional institution?
Sure. There is research out there that states pretty plainly that if you create a relationship with the student up front as early as possible, they're more likely to be retained not only that first year, but actually graduate. So if you create these relationships early on, they're more likely to feel comfortable enough to overcome the obstacles they may face and actually get through the graduation process. So we try to build those relationships early on. From our hiring of the tutors, we create those relationships. We look at the, and our tutors actually are on Upswing as well, which is helpful because these tutors have taken courses at the school, so they can relate to the students in a deeper way. When the general subject matter can be handled by any Upswing tutor, it's nice to even have our own tutors on that platform as well. The challenge, I guess, with the actual process, I've actually lost my point. But if you could tell me again, refresh me
Oh, yeah.
with that question.
Yeah, no worries. I think you hit on it pretty well there, Derek, talking about the building of a personal relationship early on. And I definitely agree from the work that we've done. It seems like HBCUs do that, almost better than, or they do it better than most traditional institutions. Um, I'd love to get, Melvin, some of your thoughts. I know you Central. What were some of the things that you saw, some of your students run into when it came to, challenges at the college?
Yeah, so I taught for a little while at North Carolina Central University, and I would definitely agree with Eric about creating those relationships. I know that at the time, I think it was probably also because of my age at the time. A lot of the students felt like they could ask a lot of different questions, and many of them weren't academic. They were really around trying to help them with their careers. And what was my journey, because they were interested in. And I think that all that's really dovetailing together, and the idea that a lot of students, especially those who are attending college for the first time, uh, are looking for that help in so many different ways. And I was fortunate that I was able to provide that type of support, and actually connected in with many of those students even past the class, where they would connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me for help over ensuing years, with things like internships, um, getting help with their resume, things like that. And so I think that creating those relationships are certainly really important. One of the things that we've, I think, seen here at Upswing as well, especially because students have been able to have the opportunity to really kind of ask whatever questions they want to ask, is that a lot of the questions that come in are actually not, solely from an academic perspective about needing help with homework and things like that, but a lot of times are around things like, what are the classes that I should take next, registration, sometimes just help with that same work-life balance that Kim was talking about earlier, actually, and that's pretty, that's certainly pretty interesting. One of our partners, our education partners, conducted a study recently which said that the average student that left college has a 3.3 GPA. And when you think about that, you begin to kind of ask, why would a student who is, on average making A's and B's, leaving college? And it's because, in a lot of those circumstances, they're not getting the answers to some of those challenges, and they're thinking they're the only ones going through it. So creating those relationships is certainly very important.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thanks for that feedback, Melvin. And I think that touches on the next point, which is around how do HBCUs engage students, both on and off campus. And kind of what we were hoping here was that, Derek, maybe you could start by talking about how you guys are engaging students on campus. And then Kim, we'd love to hear about some of the ways that you all are engaging more of your distance learners.
Sure. There are a number of ways that we engage students. We start very early with the orientation process with Ramdition. We assign 90 from sophomore to senior students as legacy leaders, and they each have at least a group of about 10 freshmen per legacy leader. So we're trying to get those relationships up and going as soon as the student gets on campus. And that legacy leader's job is to acquaint those students with anything and everything that they could think of that could be a concern, is a concern, to acquaint them with resources from the face-to-face tutoring to the online tutoring to the to where places are on campus. Where we have a pretty dynamic marketing team that's somewhat new. They've been on as a cohesive team for about 2 years, and we've utilized their services in marketing through flyers, through on-campus television screens and student centers and the eateries around campus. And then we're also starting to use more and more those mechanisms that students are looking at. They're using Snapchat, they're using Instagram, they're using Facebook less and less, but it's like it's the more the parents get on Facebook, the more they get off of it. I guess that's how technology goes. But they're utilizing those mechanisms, so we're trying to get involved with those as well, and finding where they are, the more they're actually responding to our concerns, our questions. We also use Grace First a great deal in terms of connecting faculty, staff, coaches, housing, and residence life personnel with the concerns and situations that are arising with our students. Some of that research, if people are needing the names, George Koo, and his last name is Kuh, Alexander Aston, Terzini, Pascarella, those are all student affairs, higher education administration authors that are known in that realm that talk about the importance of creating those initial relationships. And that's how we're reaching out to them. And the chancellor is doing his part to be socially mobile and to be in front of the students in the mechanisms and the technologies that they are constantly working with.
Thanks. Thanks so much for that overview there, Derek. Kim, we'd love to hear kind of from the opposite end. What are you all doing to engage more of the distance learning students? I'd imagine that maybe it's some of the same things as Derek, but maybe in different ways.
You're absolutely right, Alex. Just to piggyback on some of the points that Derek and Melvin touched on, a lot of what we started to implement in our university college here on campus, we realized we needed to model that in the online environment. So we are really taking a high-touch approach to academic success coaching. And what we found is, you know, some of those students in that online space not being able to physically be here, you know, there can be a feeling of a disconnect. So each academic unit that offers a full online degree program, we provide them with a distance education advisor. And so there is a point person in that unit that works with those students and provides that type of high touch that is needed, from advising to actually handling and navigating the whole higher ed landscape. Sometimes, you know, students get caught up in where to go, who to talk to, how this should flow. So someone is there to help them with that as well. Definitely the social media outlets. We're utilizing all of those to connect with our students. And then we realized that that last piece to make this whole advising, and if we're truly going to be high touch and intrusive advising, was upswing for us. We did not have a way for our students to get tutoring or any type of supplemental help past the normal business hours. So that piece is huge. You know, if you're having to do something late at night or just being able to schedule a tutor on your time, be it at work, during a lunch break, evening before you have dinner, or some type of soccer practice, they're able to reach out and get what they need. So I think being able to take our services online, being able to provide someone here on campus that student has a name, a number, and they can develop a relationship with, that they can call for assistance. All of those things have really helped us kind of bridge that gap, whether it's real or perceived, that gap between the campus and that online student. And that's kind of helping us out. And it's a lot of work. We'll hear it from our DE advisors. They may spend lots of time with one student, but in the end, it's worth it. That student, if they can get through that program in a timely manner and be successful, then it's all worth it for us.
That's great, Kim. And, we're really glad that we could help you guys out with not only tutoring, but also with that advising aspect also. One thing that I'm kind of curious to hear about from you, Kim, kind of as a follow-up is when you all do, release a new solution, be it a technology or a new advisor, how do you let those distance learning students know about it? Is it done through email? Is it a phone call? Are there instructors letting them know? What does that communication look like?
Sure. We actually use Constant Contact to do our email marketing. There is a new service or some type of important information we need to communicate, we will do what's called a campaign in Constant Contact to alert those students. Now that goes out by email. We know, and in talking with our students, we know that they are inundated with emails from the university. So we also try to hit our social media sites through, we're doing Instagram. We haven't ventured out into Snapchat yet in my unit, but we do Instagram, we do Facebook, we do Twitter. And sometimes if it is, we also found that emails that come from departments, their specific department, sometimes their advisor, or even sometimes as far down as the faculty member, we will, if it's that important, we'll push it out that way. And sometimes that could be as simple as through Blackboard. They may respond to something that they see coming through Blackboard, or have that faculty member post an announcement in Blackboard to alert students. So we're trying to hit them from all areas because we're still trying to get a good pulse on where and how is the best way to meet our students. We have conversations with our student government representatives to say, how should we reach out to students? And sometimes we even do something as simple as posters and flyers, even though some of the programs it may not reach our online population. We have a large number of on-campus students who take online courses, and sometimes this, can be word of mouth. So we even go back to distributing information on campus as well.
That's great. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Kim. It's interesting that you mentioned the kind of student government or student representatives, because we've seen other colleges use what they call, kind of like student influencers to help spread about services too. And, sometimes, the college or the vendor can only do so much marketing, but whenever a student hears it from a peer, then, they're much more likely to jump on and try it out. So that's a great tactic. I would love to hear from Melvin quickly on if there are different things that you've seen from other institutions in terms of how to engage students, either on campus or off campus.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that Derek mentioned was using legacy leaders. And that's something that we've seen work really well on college campuses. It does take a little while to implement for sure, but we've seen that schools that have taken to that. One school in particular that I can think of is Houston-Tillotson University in Austin, Texas. When they utilize the student resources to help become ambassadors, student ambassador assistants, it really becomes helpful from that perspective. That's actually one of the things that we've tried to work with many of our partners to be able to do as well through our own Upswing Campus Ambassador program. But we've seen that works really well for sure. On the online side, that is a bit more of a challenge for some of the reasons that Kim mentioned. You're trying to put up flyers and things like that, but if they're not on campus, they might not see that. And then there's the fact that they get inundated with emails. One of the things that we've seen that's worked well is SMS. You have to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So I know that a few schools have jumped onto the SMS bandwagon and have just started inundating students with text messages, which then makes it the same way as them being inundated with emails. So what we've learned is that a student's going to be responsive if they feel that responding to that text message is going to get them something that's beneficial to them. So we've created a system called Anna that is an AI-based assistant where a student can get a reminder, but then reply back to that reminder, and we can actually push that information to advisors or tutors or whomever, so that it feels as if that student's actually engaging in a one-to-one conversation. So those are some of the things that we've seen that works well. I think at the end of the day, it's really all about, it comes back to that personalization that we were talking about earlier. Whichever way in which you're engaging, you want to make sure that the student is feeling with a particular person and not just, kind of having messages sent out to them.
Yeah, that's a really cool point, Melvin. Are you guys finding that through Anna, it is a much more personalized experience, and how do you kind of track that or identify that?
Yeah, it's actually been really interesting. So in our email messages that we send out to students, we'll let them know about, hey, you've got finals coming up, or we know that drop ads coming soon. Here's some services you could take advantage of, whether from tutoring or advising. Our response rate has usually been around, I'd say, 10 to 15% with that, which is certainly not terrible. We put a lot of cat photos and things like that in there to try and get students interested. What we found is that when we've engaged students from the text message side, from the SMS side, that engagement rate has actually been between 50 and 70%. So it's been much higher. We basically receive a response from almost every person we send a message to. And usually that conversation, we track the number back and forth for the conversation, is typically between 2 and 3 messages. So it's not just that one response, but it's actually a communication that's actually happening back and forth with that student.
Great, thanks for that insight. Yeah, so next, what we want to kind of talk through is, so we talked a lot already about, kind of the challenges and what are the ways in which students are being engaged. One thing that we're really curious in hearing from you all are around some of the signs that a student might be falling behind, and how when they're falling behind, and then kind of what you do to, maybe bring them back up. Kim, maybe this could be a good area for you to talk about some of the things that you all do at NC Central for students who might be lagging behind.
Sure. I think one of the easiest ways that our faculty, or I guess one of the first signs our faculty look for in the online space, are students who have not logged in to Blackboard for a period of time. And if they see that it's been a while since the student has logged in, what they will do is reach out to that student first through, just through an email or through Blackboard to say, hey, I see you haven't logged in the course in a while. Is everything okay? As Derek mentioned, we also utilize grades first. So they're able to also go and put enter information into grades first to say that the student hasn't, logged in for a while. That'll go to the advisor, and then the advisor can reach out from there also. So in the online space, that's one, and it may not be the true indicator, but for us, we ask our faculty to please, if you see they're not there and they're not actively engaging in the course, to reach out so that we can catch them, before they fall too far behind. And sometimes, again, going back to my earlier response, we hear, I ended up having to work a double shift. Maybe my child might have been ill, so I was taking care of my child. So sometimes they are falling behind, and sometimes life and work get in the way, and they just need a little reminder, that they need to get back online so that they can get caught up.
Great. Yeah, that's really great, Kim. We see that quite often for students at a lot of schools we work with, where the first indicator is usually just activity. If they're not logging into Blackboard, if they're not logging in Upswing, if they're not showing up to class, that's often one of the biggest red flags. Can you just kind of maybe walk us through when you do identify that a student, it hasn't been logging in or maybe hasn't been coming to class? What does that remediation look like? Is that a conversation with an advisor? Is that a plan that you put them on? Or is that really just case by case?
So it's actually a little bit of all that you mentioned. So it is case by case, starting with the instructor reaching out and the advisor reaching out, and depending on that response from the student, then it may require some type of plan to get them back on track. And again, that is usually case by case. I would like to say, though, that typically our enrolled in a full online degree program, and we have about 925 of those. We don't really experience as much of that. When they know something is going to get in the way, they will reach out to us and say, hey, this is going on, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to complete the class. And before we allow them to drop and or withdraw, we push them to have a conversation with that advisor to talk through to see what would be the best route to make sure they can successfully complete the class. But in our other space where we have our on-campus students taking our online courses, we'll see a little more of that, where they're not completely engaged, either by logging on, participating in discussion boards, and we still obviously are reaching out to them to find out why they are not as engaged in that online environment.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kim. And yeah, I think you're spot on in terms of it kind of taking a village, or taking a mix of a lot of different people in planning to help students that are falling behind. Derek, do you kind of feel the same way about your students at Winston-Salem State? Are there other things that you all might do to, detect a student who's falling behind and then help to remediate when that does happen?
It's almost ditto in terms of the way we respond. We have engaged faculty in training with our EWS system, Grades First, where a number of faculty, if they notice a student is falling behind in grades or attendance, they will send a Grades First alert to the student and the academic success counselor. After that, the academic success counselor will reach out to the student, get them into their office, and provide hopefully an intervention that will work. Then the student's responsibility is to either go to the tutoring session or go to the counseling center, then to give them some feedback so they can close the loop. I did want to mention also just an idea for everyone in terms of the Snapchat. The university has an official Snapchat. but we found one of our goals this semester, or in planning for our next orientation, and we've done it some with the legacy leaders in the past. Uh, we're actually utilizing those students, those legacy leaders' Snapchats. We asked the legacy leaders to get the Snapchat of the freshmen, and then when we have an announcement that needs to go out to the students, starting with that freshman class, we ask the legacy leaders to send out a message through their Snapchat, because they're more likely to respond to that one than the official WSSU one. And that has been successful in a pilot sort of way. So we're going to try that. But yeah, definitely everything that Kim said, we follow that sort of a protocol in terms of trying to catch the students that are falling behind.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Derek. And that I really like that recommendation about Snapchat. I don't think we know too many institutions that are utilizing Snapchat, and that seems like a pretty good method to do it. So we did have a final question on here, and then we wanted to kind of jump on Q&A at the end. But we wanted to kind of skip that question and instead just ask each person on the panel what you all think are the one or two takeaways that the attendees can do to help to increase student success at their college. And maybe we can lead here with Melvin on that question.
Yeah, so there's definitely been some really awesome insights that have been mentioned so far. I think that from just kind of my experiences teaching, and then just some of the things we've learned here at Upswing, that the biggest thing that I would say is really around creating an engagement type conversation with your students. There have been different examples of that I've mentioned with, for example, our product Anna, but also I feel like I've heard that throughout some of the other recommendations. Derek talking about Snapchat and the legacy leaders. Kim mentioning the distance education, one-stop shop essentially for all questions that a student might have. I think that the common theme there is really trying to make sure that that student is feeling engaged on a one-to-one basis. There was actually a study that was conducted by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that was called With Their Whole Lives Behind Them. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not, but they actually asked students who had dropped out of college what were the reasons why they dropped out, and the biggest pie, which was I think 54% of students, they said my college doesn't care about me. And obviously that's not true. Colleges care about their students, but I think that creating that engagement is a way to kind of show that for the students. And so that would be the one takeaway that I would certainly leave.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that, Melvin. Derek, would you like to go ahead and kind of give one or two pieces of takeaway that you'd leave for the attendees today?
Sure. I think one of the most important things is to recognize that we're dealing with millennial and Gen Z and all these different students that think in different ways than we did. I was talking with some colleagues yesterday about how, and no, I was actually in a class, one of my classes I was teaching, and talking with students about how when I was growing up, I was plastered on Saturday morning cartoons. Students today, college age and below that, they're plastered on YouTube. So if we don't meet the students where they are now and what they've grown up with in terms of engagement, we may miss some. We may lose students. So the idea of an upswing, fantastic idea, Melvin. I mean, it actually creates relationship with those tutors. Actually, having the live tutor there in front of their face, talking to them as they work through the problem, is almost as good as the face-to-face experience. But also, we actually, and this is just the truth, we acquired Upswing to expand our ability to reach the students outside of the brick and mortar building, outside of even the res hall. So it expanded our manpower, expanded our discipline coverage in terms of topics and subjects that our tutors were equipped to handle. It expands that a great deal. And then because of the ubiquitous nature of the technology, we can reach the student wherever they are. So as long as we find out a way to get them to engage and get them to sign in, that's one way to keep them engaged. And once that student finds some success with that, and we've had success that is that shows students that come from particular classes. We compare those students that actually engage in Upswing and face-to-face tutoring, compare those students midterms, final grades, and GPAs to those students in the same classes with that did not engage in those forms of tutoring. And over again, the students that engage in tutoring and online tutoring have lower DFW rates and higher GPAs, higher grades at midterm, higher grades for their final grades. So the engagement piece and catching the students where we find them, and understanding who our students are. It's important. I think Kimberly mentioned just talking with the students is imperative. We have to understand the type of paradigm that our students are working with so that we can reach them within that paradigm and then give them the resources, education that they actually need that can help them be successful in the real world.
Wow, thanks so much for that, Derek. Yeah, that's right on, and we can definitely tell that a lot of the things that you all are doing at Winston-Salem State, it's focused on finding out how to connect in with students, how to connect in with millennials, and it definitely shows. So nice work there. Kim, we'd love for you to kind of close it out before we reach the Q&A phase here. If you had one or two takeaways to the attendees, what would you recommend?
Yes, well, I definitely concur with what Derek and Melvin have stated, but the one thing that have seen has been successful for us is to provide the resources, make sure they are available, make sure they're available without an additional cost to the student. Our university made a decision to invest in that platform so that our students would have access to free online tutoring services. And so it's just the support, having the support there, making it easy for them to access. And once you push them to that and they enter into it and use it one time, they're on and they start spreading the word to their classmates that, hey, I was able to get assistance this way, by simply logging in with your same NCCU credentials. So I think providing the support and making that support easy for the students to access is just one way that we can definitely help support our students.
Yeah, thanks for that, for sharing that one, Kim. And I think that kind of gets back also to one of Derek's stats earlier that talks about how about half of the HBCUs have more than 75% low income. If you're going to get students use services and they are already low income, it has to be without cost. And that's something that we always want to have as kind of one of our pillars at Upswing is, not placing an additional financial burden on students. And we're really, lucky to have the support and the, backing from colleges like NC Central. So we appreciate that. So that wraps up the webinar. I see that a few questions have come in, so we can take the next few minutes to go through some of those questions. One of them in here before people start leaving is that this will be archived, so we'll send out a link to the recording afterwards. So if anyone needs to leave, I know we're running up, it's about 3 minutes past time now. Feel free to go ahead and you'll be able to also see the answers to these questions in the recording as well. And it looks like some of them have been responded to. So one of the questions was around whether Upswing has an early alert system, or some sort of feature that our institutions are using right now. The answer to that is yes. So as part of our online advising platform, there is an early alert component where advisors, faculty, administrators can go in and set alerts. They can track alerts over time, add notes to them. And we've seen that this has been an especially impactful way for higher level administration to be able to see down to the, down to detail how students are doing, because they're able to see information around an alert on a student, notes associated with that alert. And that's been one of the key ways that a couple of our colleges have been, really tracking and pinpointing, when exactly our students falling behind. A faculty member might, mark an alert for low attendance. An advisor might mark an alert for, emotional instability, and a tutor might mark an alert for, poor performance during a tutoring session. So if that is something, I think that was sent in by Cassie Green, that you'd like to learn more about, we'd love to tell you a bit more about that service at Upswing. And if any of you are interested in reaching out afterwards, you can email us at speak@upswing.io. Looks like there was another question on here, Jocelyn Neal, around whether there's any programming specific for sophomores. I can kind of tell you from Upswing's perspective what we do for cohorts, and then Kim or Derek, if you guys want to jump in, if you have anything that's sophomore specific, feel free to as well. One of the things that we found to be really successful this past year has been working with a handful of our colleges to break down their student body into cohorts. Most specifically with our SMS-based tool, Anna. The way that that's worked is that schools will select a cohort, for example, sophomores, and we'll be able to customize the messaging on Anna specifically for sophomores. So if it has to do with, picking a major or internships, or other things that sophomores may run into, we're able to provide the college with really targeted and specific messaging that goes straight to the student's phone. They're able to interact with it, and we've seen that be really successful. Kim or Derek, did you guys have anything specifically that y'all are doing for sophomores as well?
We do have a special ceremony for sophomores. We establishing rendition that our retention rates for our first year freshmen was relatively high. However, the drop-off rate at the end of that sophomore year was high also. So we had to do something to try to retain those sophomores. And again, we tried to place a rites of passage sort of program in place, which also has research to prove that those sorts of ceremonies lend themselves toward retention. And we call it ramsition. Everything has a ram in front of it here. And we have our sophomore class dean who works with our student government, the sophomore class student government, to reach out to the students that are classified as sophomores, for those that are transitioning based on credit hours to their junior year. They are all invited. The chancellor speaks usually, the provost speaks, and there's a sort of camaraderie built, hopefully, and it's helped some. We've seen the rates of retention rise with those sophomores as they transition into their junior year. That's one of our biggest programs that we placed for that purpose. It's been going for about 3 years now.
And much like Derek at NCCU, we have a program that sounds very similar through our university college to help reduce that fall off for our sophomore students. At this time, I do not have anything in place specifically for my online students, but that is something we're trying to pay close attention to. And with our numbers being still relatively small, our advisors pretty much have their hands on those students, but we are doing a little research to see what we can do at each level, even at the upper level, that junior level, as to see how we can make sure we are retaining those students.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much for sharing that, Kim and Derek. And I love that. I love the Ramsitions terminology there too. We brand a lot of our products with up on the end: tutor up, advise up, mentor up. And everyone here kind of gives me a hard time for that, but I kind of stick to it. Cool. So we had one other question, which was from Tamara Ferguson. It was around the fact that she was saying that they have an early alert system, but they can't get students to respond to emails, phone calls, or letters, asking that they connect in with the student support services there. And she was asking how do you get them to respond, and that they're a commuter campus of primarily non-traditional students. I can start off by just mentioning that one of the things that we've seen to be most successful from that perspective has been, first of all, whenever we do work within more of like distance courses or distance students, a lot of the students will follow what their faculty tells them to do. So the more that we can get faculty to put in, references or links to services in their syllabus, if we can get them to mention it, at the end of class, or put it into, Canvas or Blackboard or whatever they're using, we've seen that that's often a really good way to kind of kick things off. Um, from there, what we'll do is usually try to work with them on some of our engagement tools like Anna, so that they can be integrated with things like SMS and more of the things that they're used to using on a day-to-day basis. Because we see all the time that students aren't responding to emails, or they're not answering the phone. But I'd love to hear from Kim, since you kind of run the distance education side at NC Central, are there certain things that you guys do when students aren't responding to get them to engage?
You actually are spot on, Alex. We have been utilizing, just realize that when they see something from their faculty member, they tend to respond. But now we feel like we're hitting a slippery slope. We want our faculty to teach and deliver that content and assess students. So we don't want them to feel like we're just pushing them to also send messages. But that has been the best way to go right now. Some departments that have a smaller population will not, let's say if it's around registration or early registration, they won't release the PIN numbers that our students need in order to register themselves, to do self-service registration. They will withhold those until that student has contacted them. But again, that's kind of by department right now. But as a whole, we're just trying to utilize our faculty to have students to get pertinent information and make sure students respond to it. So we still do the emails, we still do the blast announcements on Blackboard, but it's something about Dr. Such and Such reaching out to you that you're gonna click on that and see what he has to say.
Yeah, definitely. And Derek, are you finding that that's very similar as well for your students?
Yeah, that's definitely a ditto. When faculty request something, students are much quicker to respond. We actually also see that if they respond through Grades First, which actually puts a strange little banner on the email, they're more likely to open the email. It's really helpful if they contact the ASC or the academic success counselor, because their job is literally to get to that student as soon as possible. So that's worked really well.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone. That's it for the questions. I want to give a special thank you to Derek and Kim for being here on the panel today, and also to Melvin. We didn't really touch much on this at the beginning, but Central and Winston-Salem State are two of kind of the pioneering colleges that we work with, not only in HBCUs, but in kind of colleges and universities across the country. Melvin was just showing me that I think Winston-Salem State recently received a merit award from the Case Award.
And has also been recognized as one of the, as I'm sure Derek already knows, one of the top best values in North Carolina. North Carolina Central has been recognized as one of the top colleges for military families. So guys are definitely doing a lot of really, really great work in the state of North Carolina and across the country as well. And so we certainly appreciate being able to be on the webinar with you all and share some of the best practices that you all see are working for your students.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. And yes, we can definitely send out a list of the HBCUs and PBIs that we're working with around the country, Cassie. Great, so we'll follow up with a link to this recording. If you guys do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us, speak@upswing.io. If you want to reach out to Kim or Derek individually, just shoot us a message and we can share their contact info with you also. Thanks everyone for attending, and have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Kim.